This video was sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Hone, and it's Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. At least, that's normally what I do in this series. Right now I'm in the midst of my Adventures in the Forgotten Realms limited set review, and as usual, when there's a brand new limited format, I'm doing a video on the 10 biggest bombs in the format. In Magic, a bomb is a good thing and refers to a card that is so hugely powerful that it completely shifts the game in your favor. These are cards that you really want to see in your sealed pool or as your first pick in a draft. Alright, let's get to the list. At number 10, I have Ranger class. This is the only class to make the list, and I think what makes it better than all the others, partly at least, is that when it comes down, it adds something to the battlefield. It gives you that 2/2 Green Wolf creature token for 2 mana. Then, when you get it to level 2 and you've paid a total of 4 mana, you have that Wolf creature token and an enchantment that every time you attack puts a +1/+1 counter on one of your attacking creatures. It's kind of like Sparring Regiment. It's probably not quite as good because Learning turned out to be so darn good, but it has a very similar impact on the board. And then in the later part of the game, you can also level it up again to the point where you can start playing creatures off the top of your library, which is effectively drawing you extra cards. So even just level 2 on this is going to feel really great, and once you get to level 3 in the later part of the game, it's going to be pretty unbeatable. Your opponent playing this on turn 2 is not really what you're going to want to see in this format because it's going to be hard to beat. The good news is there are ways to blow it up, but even if someone does, once again, you have that 2/2 Wolf creature token and whatever counters it managed to put on things too. At number 9, I have Drist Do Erden. He starts out as a 5-mana 3/3 double striker. That isn't the best card ever, but the fact he brings a 4/1 with trample to the battlefield too is amazing. It means you're paying 5 mana for 7/4 worth of stats. 4/1 of it has trample, 3/3 of it has double strike. And that would be a really good card, but what finally really pushes Drist into bomb territory is the fact that anytime a creature with more power than him dies, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Drist. And that means when the 4/1 dies, Drist will gain a counter, and a 4/4 double strike is really, really scary. And obviously, if you have other bigger creatures around, he's also going to like when they die and gain counters from them. At number 8, it is Westgate Regent. This starts out as a 5-mana 4/4 flyer, an air elemental, which is great stats to begin with, and would make the cut in most limited decks. But he also comes with 2 other powerful abilities. Ward means that anytime your opponent wants to target him with removal, they have to discard a card, so they have to 2-for-1 themselves at best against Westgate Regent. And on top of that, anytime the Regent hits your opponent, it gets that many +1/+1 counters, 1 counter for every damage. That means it goes from being a 4/4 to an 8/8 to a 16/16. So it puts your opponent on a 3-turn clock really at best. And again, the fail case is that your opponent 2-for-1s themselves, and that is amazing. At number 7, it's Xanathar Guild Kingpin. Unlike most of the cards on this list, Xanathar does need you to get to your next turn to make sure you get some value out of it. Everything else on this list does something when it enters the battlefield, or leaves a token behind, or does something that makes it so when your opponent kills it, they're not really getting full value because you got something out of the card anyway. That's not true with Xanathar. You have to wait all the way until your next upkeep, but what it does on your first upkeep and all your upkeeps thereafter, after you play it, is so powerful that it makes this list anyway. First of all, your opponent can't play spells during your turn, and that doesn't hurt. But the part that makes it amazing is you can play cards off the top of your opponent's library and use mana as if it were mana of any color to play those cards. You can also play lands off of Xanathar because it just says play, and this means you can kind of rip through cards on the top of your opponent's library. You can play a land, and then you hit a spell, and you play that spell, and maybe you have more mana to play the next spell. You're not always going to have enough mana to go crazy like that, but you are usually going to be able to cast stuff off of your opponent's library, and that's effectively drawing extra cards, and that's just insane. Even if you only get 1 turn with Xanathar in play, he's probably going to give you so much value in that time that it will be hard for you to lose. But again, you do have to wait all the way until your next upkeep, so if they kill him right away, you don't get anything. But the ceiling here is insane, so we had to make this list. At number 6, I have Mordan, a really powerful planeswalker. His +2 draws you cards, gives you a bit of card selection, and his -2 makes creature tokens. So that means he can draw you cards and protect himself. His -2 makes a dog illusion creature token, and that token has power and toughness each equal to twice the number of cards in your hand. So this means if you just have 2 cards in your hand, he makes 4 4s, which are pretty sizable tokens for a planeswalker to make. Even with just one card in your hand, they're 2/2s. Now, the downside is if you have 0 cards, they die, but the upside is if you have 4 cards, they're 8/8s, so the upside there definitely outweighs the bad. He's also got a powerful ultimate that will win you the game because you basically draw your whole library and get to hold on to all the cards. But I feel like usually the +2 and the -2 are what are going to get you the win with Mordan. At number 5, I have Imrith, Desert Doom. This card reminds me a lot of Dragonlord Ojutai, and Dragonlord Ojutai was an amazing bomb in Tarkir Block Limited. It starts with amazing stats as a 5-mana 5/5 flyer. On top of that, it has Ward 4 as long as it's untapped. Dragonlord Ojutai had straight up Hexproof as long as it was untapped, but Ward 4 is pretty huge and going to feel like Hexproof most of the time. And when it hits your opponent, you get to draw at least 1 card. If you have fewer than 3 cards in your hand after you draw that card, you get to draw cards equal to the difference. That means, by the way, if your hand is empty, you draw 3 cards, which is pretty insane. And no matter what, you draw at least 1 card. This doesn't have an enter the battlefield ability or leave a token behind or anything like that, but because it has Ward 4 when it's untapped, it makes sure that most of the time you're going to get in at least 1 swing with it, and that means the best your opponent's going to be able to do is chump block it, which will mean you get a 2-for-1, or they take it and you draw at least 1 card, which still means you get a 2-for-1, and if they don't kill it, they just lose the game. At number 4, it is Ebb and Death Dracolich. This is a 4-mana 5/2 flyer with flash and flying that enters the battlefield tapped. That would be a card you always play and a great card in your limited deck, but not a bomb. What makes Ebb and Death Dracolich a bomb is its ability to constantly come back from the graveyard pretty much all game long. As long as at least 1 creature not named Ebb and Death Dracolich has died, you can cast Ebb and Death Dracolich from your graveyard. This means that if you attack with it and your opponent blocks with a 2/2 flyer and kills it, you can just play Ebb and Death Dracolich again. And because it has flash, you can set up more situations where something dies and you can still cast Ebb and Death from your graveyard because you can do it on your opponent's turn. A 5/2 flyer just constantly coming back and attacking your opponent in the air is going to make them lose the game eventually. At number 3, it is Orcus, Prince of Undeath. This is a 4-mana 5/3 with flying and trample. This is another stat line that would be incredible if that's all this card was, but he also has a huge text box where you choose between 2 powerful modal abilities. You don't have to pump mana into X to use these, but that's nice. That means if you have more than 4 mana, you can just pump a bunch of extra mana into this and get some extra value. And your options are giving everything -X until end of turn and you lose X life. And actually, it's not everything. It doesn't count Orcus. So he'll survive that ability no matter what. And if that ability doesn't appeal to you because maybe you have a more commanding board state than your opponent does and you don't really want to wipe your board, or your opponent has too big of creatures for you to pump enough mana into it, you can just choose the other option, which lets you reanimate a creature or creatures with total mana value X or less from your graveyard, and they gain haste. So no matter what, Orcus is going to do something most of the time, unless you cast it for straight up 4, which will be the right thing to do sometimes, but most of the time you're going to try to want to get this extra value out of Orcus that will really allow you to reshape the board in a big way, in addition to just adding a 5/3 flying trampler to the battlefield. At number 2, it is Lolth, Spider Queen, a very powerful planeswalker. She can't raise her own loyalty with a loyalty ability, but anytime a creature you control dies, you put a loyalty counter on her. She has a 0 ability that draws you a card and loses you 1 life. Planeswalkers that draw you a card are great. This is basically Phyrexian Arena in that sense. And it has a -3 that makes 2/1 Black Spider creature tokens with Menace and Reach. And those tokens are amazing because they'll be so good at protecting her. Because they have Reach, not even flyers are going to be able to go after Lolth. And if you do just chump with these spider creature tokens, you get back 2 loyalty counters. So it's really like it's a -1 ability some of the time because you can just get those loyalty counters back when those spiders die. And because her static ability gives her loyalty, your opponent has to be a little bit cautious about attacking you because if you can just like block a bunch of ways and add loyalty counters to her, you can suddenly use that ultimate. And that ultimate is no joke. It's not always going to be the easiest thing to make it trigger, but the fact that as long as you do 1 to your opponent, they end up losing 8 on the turn is pretty awesome. Before we get to number 1, here are some honorable mentions. These are the other cards that received bomb grades in my set review, but didn't quite make this list. If you want to hear me talk about these cards and all the other cards in Adventures in Forgotten Realms and Limited, you can check out my full set review, which is available, and you should see a playlist at the end of this video. But for now, let's move to number 1, which is Icing Death, Frost, Tyrant. So this starts out another card with amazing starting stats as a 4-mana 4/3 with flying and vigilance. So that's the kind of stat line that can kill your opponent in a hurry if they don't have removal. But what really makes Icing Death a bomb is that even if your opponent kills it, sure, they got rid of this scary dragon, but in exchange, you get an incredibly powerful equipment that equips for 2 and gives +2/+0 to any creature you put it on, And most importantly, whenever that creature attacks, you tap target creature defending player controls. That kind of equipment is amazing. It'll make any creature into a threat. So if they give up resources to deal with Icing Death, and then you get this equipment and you can just put it on whatever creature you want, and it will cause problems for your opponent, that's what makes this an insane bomb, because that's just what's going to happen with it most of the time. Those are my picks for the 10 biggest bombs in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms Limited. If you want to own any of these powerful cards, you can pre-order them on Card Kingdom. In the description, you'll find a direct link for each card on this list that will take you to their store. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future content, including more MTG Top 10s and Adventures in the Forgotten Realms Limited content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.